On a cool Friday evening in Richmond, Virginia, the city moved with its usual rhythm. Cars rolled beneath glowing traffic lights. Families filled neighborhood restaurants, and the last streaks of orange sunlight faded behind rows of brick buildings that had witnessed generations of triumph and heartbreak. Most people hurried home without noticing the young woman walking calmly along East Broad Street, a paper shopping bag resting lightly in her hand. Olivia Harris looked like anyone else finishing a long week. Dressed in a navy blazer over a simple white blouse, she carried herself with quiet confidence, offering a warm smile to an elderly couple as they passed. Inside the bag was a small leather-bound journal she had purchased as a birthday gift for her father, Chief Robert Harris. Every year, she tried to find something meaningful instead of expensive, because her father had always told her that character was measured by thoughtfulness, not by price. Olivia often remembered his words whenever life tested her patience. He had spent decades wearing a badge, yet he never allowed power to replace compassion. Growing up, she watched him leave home before sunrise and return long after dark, never complaining, never speaking proudly about his rank. Instead, he reminded her that respect could never be demanded. It had to be earned every single day. Those lessons had shaped the woman she had become. She believed kindness revealed strength, and calmness often spoke louder than anger. A few blocks away, Officer Travis Miller sat inside his patrol vehicle watching traffic crawl through the intersection. His uniform was crisp, his boots polished, and his badge reflected the glow of the dashboard lights. To many people he appeared dependable, the kind of officer citizens trusted without hesitation. Yet beneath that polished image lived something far less admirable. Years of believing his instincts were never wrong had quietly turned confidence into arrogance. Complaints had followed him before, each one disappearing behind paperwork, technicalities, or supervisors willing to give him another chance. Every escape reinforced the dangerous belief that his judgment stood above. Question: as Olivia approached a crosswalk, Travis noticed her from inside the cruiser. His eyes followed her for only a second before assumptions filled the spaces where facts should have been. Without knowing her name, without hearing her voice, he convinced himself something about her seemed suspicious. The engine of the patrol car started softly before easing toward the curb. Several pedestrians glanced over, sensing nothing more than another routine police stop. Olivia slowed as the flashing lights reflected across the storefront windows behind her. She turned with a composed expression, unaware that within the next few minutes her ordinary evening would become the beginning of a story no one standing on that sidewalk would ever forget. And before the sun rose again, one badge would remain on its owner's chest, while another would be taken away. Forever, Olivia stopped beside the curb exactly as the patrol vehicle came to a smooth halt. She did not appear frightened, only surprised that she had suddenly become the center of attention. Around her, people continued walking. A delivery truck rumbled through the intersection, and music drifted from a nearby cafe where friends laughed over dinner. It looked like an ordinary evening, yet something in the air felt strangely heavy, as though the city itself had paused to watch what would happen next. Officer Travis Miller stepped out of his cruiser with measured confidence, adjusting the radio clipped to his shoulder before approaching her. Years on the force had taught him how to project authority before speaking a single word, and he relied on that presence more than anything else. Olivia greeted him politely with a calm smile. "Good evening, officer. Is something wrong?" Her voice was steady and respectful, exactly as her father had taught her to be whenever she encountered law enforcement. Travis barely acknowledged her greeting. His eyes moved from the shopping bag in her hand to the jacket she wore, and then back to her face, searching for reasons to justify the suspicion that had already settled in his mind. "I need to see your identification," he said firmly. Olivia nodded without hesitation. "Of course." She slowly reached into her purse, carefully removing her wallet before handing him her driver's license. She understood that sudden movements could easily be misunderstood, and patience often prevented unnecessary misunderstandings. Travis examined the card for several long seconds. "Olivia Harris." The address was only a few miles away. Everything appeared perfectly ordinary, yet instead of easing his doubts, he found himself searching for another reason to continue questioning her. "Where are you coming from?" he asked. "I was shopping downtown," Olivia answered honestly. She lifted the paper bag slightly. "I found a birthday gift for my father." Travis glanced toward the bag without asking to see inside it. "What does your father do?" The question sounded casual, but there was an unmistakable edge behind it. Olivia paused for the briefest moment. She had never enjoyed introducing herself through someone else's career. Her father had always insisted that every person should stand on their own character rather than borrowed authority. "He works in public service," she replied quietly. The answer was truthful, though incomplete. Travis folded his arms. "That is not very specific." Olivia remained composed. "I do not think it changes why I am standing here." Nearby, two teenagers slowed their pace, pretending to check their phones while quietly observing the conversation. A woman walking her dog glanced over her shoulder before continuing down the sidewalk. No one interrupted. Everyone simply watched. Travis handed the identification back, but made no effort to end the encounter. Instead, he took another slow look around, as though expecting evidence to appear simply because he believed it should. Olivia noticed the silence stretching between them. She could feel curious eyes settling on her from every direction, yet she refused to let embarrassment replace dignity. She stood with relaxed shoulders and steady breathing, remembering countless conversations around the dinner table where Chief Robert Harris reminded her that true strength was measured by self-control when others expected anger. Travis took one step closer, his expression hardening. "I'm not finished with you yet," he said. Olivia met his eyes without raising her voice. "Officer, I have answered every question honestly." Neither of them realized that only a few feet away, mounted above the entrance of a small bookstore, a security camera had been recording every second since the patrol car first pulled to the curb. The quiet tension that settled over the sidewalk became impossible to ignore. People who had been walking with purpose now slowed almost instinctively, their attention pulled toward the unfolding encounter. Nobody raised a voice. Nobody interfered. They simply watched the uncomfortable silence grow heavier with every passing second. Officer Travis Miller believed he was completely in control. To him, this was another routine stop, another opportunity to prove that his instincts deserved unquestioned trust. He had built his career believing confidence alone could substitute for certainty. Over the years, fellow officers had occasionally questioned his decisions, but every internal review seemed to end the same way. Insufficient evidence. No policy violation. Case closed. Those outcomes had slowly convinced him that his judgment rarely needed to be challenged. Olivia Harris remained remarkably composed despite the attention surrounding her. She noticed the curious expressions from strangers and felt the familiar discomfort that comes with being publicly scrutinized, yet she refused to let frustration dictate her actions. Her father had always reminded her that dignity was easiest to lose when emotions took control. As a child, she once asked him why he stayed so calm during difficult situations. Chief Robert Harris had smiled and answered, "Because the moment anger controls your decisions, someone else controls your future." Those words echoed quietly in her mind now. Travis glanced once more toward the shopping bag in her hand. "Set the bag on the ground," he instructed. Olivia complied immediately, placing it carefully beside her feet. Inside rested the leather journal wrapped neatly in tissue paper along with a handwritten birthday card she had spent nearly an hour rewriting until every sentence felt worthy of her father. Travis looked inside the bag, only briefly before stepping back. Everything appeared exactly as Olivia had described. Yet instead of accepting what he saw, he seemed increasingly determined to justify stopping her in the first place. "You seem unusually calm," he remarked. Olivia answered without hesitation. Being respectful should never be unusual. The response caught him off guard for only a moment. He frowned, interpreting her confidence as defiance rather than composure. A middle-aged man, standing outside the bookstore, quietly shook his head before pulling out his phone. Across the street, another pedestrian did the same. They were not recording because anything dramatic had happened. They were recording because something about the interaction simply did not feel right. Travis noticed several phones pointed in his direction. Rather than reconsidering his approach, he straightened his shoulders even further. Authority, he believed, became stronger when displayed publicly. Olivia noticed the cameras as well, but kept her attention focused on the officer standing before her. She knew that every word mattered now, every expression, every decision. "Officer," she said gently, "if there's a specific reason you stopped me, I would appreciate understanding it." Travis answered after a brief pause. "You match behavior that concerned me." Olivia looked around the nearly empty sidewalk before returning her eyes to his. What behavior was that? The question lingered unanswered. Travis searched for an explanation that sounded convincing, but none came easily. Instead, he reached toward the radio attached to his shoulder and requested additional assistance. The dispatcher acknowledged the call with routine professionalism. Within moments, the faint sound of another patrol vehicle echoed somewhere in the distance. Olivia lowered her eyes briefly, taking one slow breath before looking back up. She did not realize that only minutes earlier her father had finished an evening leadership meeting at police headquarters less than 4 miles away. His phone rested silently on the passenger seat beside him as he began the drive home, completely unaware that before the night was over, one unexpected call would change far more than either of them could possibly imagine. The distant sound of another patrol vehicle grew louder before fading as it stopped at the opposite end of the block. A second officer stepped out, surveyed the scene, and walked toward Travis with a questioning look. "What do we have?" he asked quietly. Travis answered without hesitation. "Possible suspicious activity. I am still sorting it out." The second officer glanced briefly at Olivia, then at the neatly folded shopping bag resting on the sidewalk. Nothing about the scene appeared urgent, yet he chose to remain silent, trusting the judgment of the senior officer already handling the stop. Olivia watched the exchange with the same calm expression she had maintained since the flashing lights first appeared behind her. Inside, however, disappointment slowly replaced surprise. She had spent her entire life believing that respectful conversation could resolve misunderstanding, but every answer she offered seemed only to prolong the encounter. She remembered sitting across from her father at the kitchen table years earlier, after he returned from a particularly difficult shift. She had asked whether wearing a badge automatically made someone fair. Chief Robert Harris had smiled gently before answering. "No badge can replace good judgment. The badge only reminds people of the responsibility they accepted." At the time, she had not fully understood those words. Standing on the sidewalk now, they suddenly carried a deeper meaning. Travis took another look at her identification before slipping it into his pocket instead of returning it immediately. "Until I finish verifying everything, you are staying right here," he said. Olivia nodded once. "I will cooperate." The simplicity of her answer seemed almost to frustrate him. He had expected an argument, an emotional reaction, or at least visible irritation. Instead, she remained composed, leaving him with nothing to justify the certainty he projected. Around them, the small crowd continued to grow. A restaurant employee paused outside the entrance during a break. 2 college students stood quietly beside a bus stop. A rideshare driver waiting for his passenger lowered his window to observe from a respectful distance. Several phones remained raised, recording without commentary. The atmosphere felt strangely quiet, as though everyone sensed they were witnessing a moment that would matter later. Travis contacted dispatch again, requesting another records check. The dispatcher responded that Olivia Harris had no outstanding warrants, no criminal history, and a valid driver's license. For a brief moment, silence filled the air. Most people listening would have expected the encounter to end there. Instead, Travis folded his arms and looked directly at Olivia. "Sometimes records do not tell the whole story," he said. Olivia answered with measured patience. "Sometimes they do." The second officer shifted his weight uneasily, but said nothing. Even he seemed to recognize that the conversation had reached a point where facts no longer appeared to be guiding decisions. Olivia slowly looked toward the bookstore windows, noticing her reflection beneath the soft evening lights. She hardly recognized the situation unfolding around her. Only 30 minutes earlier, she had been choosing wrapping paper for her father's birthday gift. Now strangers were quietly filming her, while an ordinary walk home had become an unexpected public spectacle. She reached carefully into her purse again, moving slowly enough that neither officer could misunderstand her intention. Travis immediately became alert. "What are you reaching for?" he asked. Olivia stopped and looked directly at him. "My phone," she answered evenly. "I would like to make one call." Travis studied her face for several long seconds before replying. "One call. That is all." Olivia gently removed her phone, unlocked the screen, and without the slightest hesitation pressed the first name saved in her favorites. The contact displayed only two simple words. "Dad." The phone rang only once before the call connected. Olivia did not raise her voice or allow emotion to take control. "Dad," she said softly, "I'm sorry to bother you this evening." On the other end of the line, Chief Robert Harris immediately recognized the calmness in her voice. It was the same calm she had learned from him over many years, and he knew that when she sounded this composed during an unexpected call, something serious had happened. "Olivia," he answered, "where are you?" She glanced at the street sign beside the bookstore. "I am on East Broad Street near 9th Street. I was stopped by an officer while walking home." Robert remained silent for a brief moment before asking his next question with remarkable precision. "Are you safe?" "Yes," she replied. "I am safe." "Are you injured?" "No." "Have you remained respectful?" A faint smile crossed Olivia's face despite the uncomfortable situation. "Yes, Dad. I have answered every question honestly." Robert exhaled quietly. Those answers told him almost everything he needed to know. "Stay exactly where you are," he said calmly. "Do not argue with anyone. I will be there as soon as I can." "All right." She ended the call and carefully lowered the phone. Travis watched the brief conversation without attempting to hide his skepticism. "Finished?" he asked. Olivia nodded. "Yes." Travis extended his hand. "I will need you to put the phone away." She complied immediately, slipping it back into her purse. The second officer observed the exchange without comment, though something about Olivia's steady confidence continued to unsettle him. Most people facing an extended police stop became anxious or defensive. She had done neither. She simply waited with remarkable patience, as though she trusted that the truth required no performance. Across town, Chief Robert Harris turned his vehicle toward downtown Richmond. His expression remained composed, but his thoughts moved quickly. During more than 25 years in law enforcement, he had responded to countless difficult situations. He had learned that assumptions solved nothing and that every incident deserved facts before conclusions. He did not know exactly what had happened to his daughter, but he knew Olivia well enough to trust her judgment completely. She had never used his position to escape responsibility, and she had never called asking him to intervene in ordinary disagreements. If she had reached out tonight, there was a reason. As Robert accelerated toward the city center, he activated neither emergency lights nor siren. He had no intention of arriving as an angry father demanding answers. He would arrive as a leader seeking the truth. Back on the sidewalk, the evening air grew cooler as the last traces of daylight disappeared behind the skyline. Store owners began locking their doors, while passing traffic reflected across the polished windows lining the street. Travis checked his watch before looking toward Olivia once again. "Who exactly did you call?" he asked. Olivia answered without hesitation. "My father." Travis gave a faint smile that carried more confidence than curiosity. "Well, I hope he can explain why you attracted so much attention tonight." Olivia met his eyes with the same calm expression she had carried from the beginning. "I believe the facts will explain everything." The words lingered in the quiet evening air. A few feet away, the bookstore security camera continued recording every second, while several witnesses remained nearby, unwilling to leave before discovering how the story would end. Less than 10 minutes away, a black sport utility vehicle turned on a broad street, moving steadily through the evening traffic toward an encounter that would soon test far more than one officer's judgment. The black sport utility vehicle moved quietly through downtown Richmond, blending into the evening traffic without drawing attention. There are no flashing lights, no sirens, and no dramatic display of authority. Inside, Chief Robert Harris kept both hands steady on the steering wheel, his thoughts focused not on assumptions but on facts. Throughout his career, he had reminded every young officer under his command that the truth was discovered through patience, not pride. Tonight, he intended to follow that same principle, even though the person waiting for him was his own daughter. Back on East Broad Street, the atmosphere had changed in subtle ways. The small crowd had grown larger, though everyone remained respectful. A restaurant manager stood just outside the entrance with folded arms. Several customers lingered beside parked cars instead of driving away. A city bus paused at a nearby stop, and even after passengers stepped off, a few remained nearby, quietly observing the unusual scene. Nobody shouted. Nobody interrupted. Curiosity alone held them there. Olivia Harris stood exactly where she had been asked to remain. Her shopping bag still rested neatly beside her feet, untouched except for the brief inspection earlier. She looked neither defeated nor angry. Instead, she appeared remarkably composed, as though she understood that moments like these often revealed more about character than words ever could. Travis Miller interpreted her calmness very differently. To him, it looked like confidence without explanation. He convinced himself that she expected special treatment simply because she had called someone for help. The thought strengthened his determination to continue exactly as he had planned. "Your father's taking his time," Travis remarked, glancing toward the street. Olivia answered quietly, "He will come." There was no arrogance in her voice, only certainty. The second officer shifted uncomfortably once again. He had replayed the conversation in his mind several times and found himself asking a simple question that he could not ignore. If dispatch had confirmed there were no warrants, no criminal history, and no evidence of wrongdoing, why were they still standing here? Before he could speak, headlights appeared at the far end of the block. The black sport utility vehicle slowed before pulling smoothly against the curb. The engine stopped. For several seconds, nothing happened. The silence felt almost louder than the passing traffic. Every eye turned toward the driver's door. Travis watched with folded arms, expecting nothing more than an upset parent ready to defend a grown daughter. The door opened, and a tall man wearing a charcoal suit stepped onto the sidewalk with calm, deliberate movements. His posture reflected years of discipline rather than intimidation. He closed the vehicle door gently, adjusted his jacket, and looked first toward Olivia instead of the officers. She offered him a small, reassuring smile. "I'm all right," she said before he could ask. Robert nodded once. "I can see that." Only then did he shift his attention toward the officers standing several feet away. His expression remained composed, revealing neither anger nor accusation. He walked forward at an unhurried pace, stopping a respectful distance from Travis Miller. Several members of the crowd exchanged puzzled looks. Some recognized the face immediately. Others simply sensed that the atmosphere had changed. Even the second officer unconsciously straightened his posture. Travis extended a hand in professional greeting, still unaware of the significance of the man standing before him. "Good evening, sir," he said confidently. "I understand you are her father." Robert shook his hand politely before answering in the same calm voice that had guided an entire police department through countless difficult moments. "Yes," he replied. "My name is Robert Harris. Before we discuss anything else, I would like to understand exactly why my daughter has been detained here tonight." Travis Miller maintained his confident expression as he looked at the man standing before him. "Your daughter matched behavior that raised concern," he explained. "I conducted a lawful stop to verify the situation." Robert Harris listened without interrupting. Years of leadership had taught him that people often revealed far more when they were allowed to finish speaking. He briefly looked toward Olivia, then at the shopping bag resting beside her, and finally at the small gathering of silent witnesses lining the sidewalk. Nothing about the scene suggested panic or danger. It looked instead like an encounter that had simply lasted far longer than necessary. Has my daughter refused any lawful instruction? Robert asked calmly. Travis hesitated for a moment before answering. No. Has she identified herself? Yes. Has dispatch confirmed her identification? Yes. Any warrants? No. Any criminal history? No. Each answer arrived more quietly than the one before it. The second officer lowered his eyes, already sensing where the conversation was leading. Robert folded his hands in front of him, his voice remaining measured and professional. Then help me understand why she is still standing here. Travis searched for the certainty he had displayed only minutes earlier. Sometimes experience tells you there is more to a situation than paperwork can reveal. Robert nodded thoughtfully. Experience is valuable, he replied, but experience must always follow facts. It can never replace them. The words settled over the sidewalk with unexpected weight. Several people exchanged glances without saying anything. Even passing drivers slowed slightly as they noticed the unusually quiet gathering. Olivia remained completely still, allowing the conversation to unfold without interference. She knew her father well enough to understand that he never rushed to conclusions, even when those conclusions might favor someone he loved. Robert turned briefly toward his daughter. Olivia, have you answered every question honestly? Yes, Dad. Have you remained respectful throughout this encounter? Yes. Did you cooperate with every instruction? Yes. Robert gave a slight nod before looking back at Travis. Officer Miller, may I ask one more question? Go ahead. At any point during this encounter, did my daughter identify me or attempt to influence your decisions by mentioning my position? Travis looked toward Olivia for a brief second before answering truthfully. No, she only said she called her father. Robert smiled faintly. That is exactly what I expected. Travis frowned. What do you mean? Robert's expression remained composed. I've spent my entire career teaching my officers that the badge belongs to the community, not to the family of the person wearing it. My daughter has never introduced herself through my title because I taught her that integrity means standing on your own name. Those words lingered in the evening air. Several witnesses slowly lowered their phones, realizing they were listening to something far more meaningful than an ordinary disagreement. Travis shifted his weight uneasily. For the first time since the stop began, uncertainty appeared across his face. The second officer quietly looked at Robert's face once more, and then his eyes widened with sudden recognition. He had seen that face countless times during department briefings, award ceremonies, and leadership meetings. His posture immediately straightened. He leaned slightly toward Travis and spoke just loudly enough to be heard. Sir, I think you should know who this is. Travis glanced sideways with visible confusion. Before he could respond, the second officer removed his patrol cap respectfully and addressed the man standing before them with unmistakable formality. Good evening, Chief Harris. The entire sidewalk fell silent for a long moment. Nobody spoke. The traffic continued moving through the intersection, but the quiet on the sidewalk seemed to separate itself from the rest of the city. Officer Travis Miller looked from his partner to Robert Harris, trying to process what he had just heard. Chief Harris? He repeated, his voice noticeably lower than before. Robert answered with a simple nod. Yes. There was no satisfaction in his expression, no attempt to embarrass anyone in front of the growing crowd. His calm demeanor remained unchanged, making the realization even more uncomfortable for Travis. He replayed the last 30 minutes in his mind, remembering every question, every assumption, every unnecessary delay. The confidence that had guided his decisions only moments earlier slowly gave way to uncertainty. Robert spoke first. Officer Miller, my position is not the issue tonight. Travis looked confused. Robert continued in the same steady voice. If my daughter had done something wrong, I would expect you to enforce the law professionally. No exceptions. But if she has done nothing wrong, then she deserves the same respect as every other citizen who walks these streets. The words carried more weight than any raised voice ever could. The second officer quietly nodded, understanding exactly what the chief meant. Robert turned toward Olivia. Did you ever tell him who I was? No, that. Did you ask for special treatment? No. Good. He offered her a brief smile before facing the officers once again. That is because I taught her that the law must never depend on a family name. Travis lowered his eyes for a moment. The realization was becoming impossible to ignore. This encounter had never required influence, authority, or personal connections. It had required objective facts from the very beginning. Robert glanced toward the bookstore across the sidewalk. Mounted above the entrance, the security camera continued blinking quietly beneath the awning. He then noticed several bystanders still holding their phones. "Officer," Robert said calmly, "I believe there are multiple recordings of tonight's interaction, including your body camera, public surveillance, and independent witnesses." Travis instinctively touched the body camera attached to the center of his uniform. He had almost forgotten it had documented every conversation since stepping out of his patrol vehicle. Robert continued without accusation. "Those recordings will answer every question far better than opinions or assumptions ever could." The second officer finally spoke. "Chief, I believe that would be the appropriate next step." Robert nodded. "I agree." He did not ask for discipline. He did not request favors. He requested only accountability. Travis slowly removed Olivia's driver's license from his pocket and handed it back with both hands. "Miss Harris," he said quietly, "here is your identification." Olivia accepted it politely. "Thank you." She neither celebrated nor criticized him. Her restraint made the moment even more humbling. Robert looked at his daughter with quiet pride. She had remained respectful from beginning to end, exactly as he had taught her throughout her life. The witnesses who had gathered began quietly speaking among themselves. Several lowered their phones, recognizing that the most powerful moment of the evening had not been a dramatic confrontation, but a calm insistence on fairness. Before leaving, Robert addressed both officers one final time. "By tomorrow morning, the recordings, dispatch logs, witness statements, and departmental procedures will speak for themselves. Whatever conclusion they reach, I expect everyone involved, including myself if necessary, to accept it with integrity." Travis watched as Robert picked up the birthday gift from the sidewalk and handed the shopping bag back to Olivia. Together, they began walking toward the black sport utility vehicle, while behind them the blinking light on the body camera continued preserving every second a night that would soon be reviewed far beyond that quiet Richmond Street morning arrived with clear skies over Richmond. But inside police headquarters, the atmosphere was far heavier than the weather outside. The events from the previous evening had already reached internal affairs before the first shift briefing began. Body camera recordings were reviewed from beginning to end. Dispatch logs confirmed every radio transmission. Security footage from the bookstore captured the entire encounter from another angle. Statements from witnesses matched one another with remarkable consistency. Piece by piece, the facts formed a timeline that required no interpretation and no speculation. They simply spoke for themselves. Officer Travis Miller sat quietly in an administrative office, watching portions of the recordings replay on a monitor. For the first time, he saw the encounter exactly as everyone else would see it. He watched Olivia Harris answer every question respectfully. He heard dispatch confirm that she had no warrants and no criminal history. He saw how the stop continued long after the available facts justified it. Most difficult of all, he watched himself ignore opportunities to end the encounter professionally. Confidence that had once seemed unquestionable now appeared very different when viewed without emotion. Across the building, Chief Robert Harris attended the review only when requested to clarify factual details. He refused to influence the outcome or recommend a particular consequence. His position remained exactly what it had been the night before. The department's procedures existed for moments like this, and they deserved to function without interference, even when his own family had been involved. Olivia chose not to attend the review at all. She spent the morning at work, determined not to let one difficult evening define her future. She believed that true justice was not measured by how loudly people argued, but by whether institutions remained willing to examine themselves honestly. Shortly before noon, the review reached its conclusion. Supervisors determined that the extended detention had not been supported by the available facts and that professional standards had not been met. Administrative action followed according to departmental policy. Travis was informed that his law enforcement authority had been suspended pending further employment decisions, and before leaving the building, he was instructed to surrender the badge he had worn with such confidence the day before. He placed it carefully on the desk without protest. The polished piece of metal looked exactly the same as it always had, yet it no longer represented authority. It now represented responsibility that had not been honored. As Travis walked through the front entrance of headquarters, he noticed the familiar weight missing from his uniform. For the first time in many years, he understood that a badge was never meant to prove someone was important. It was meant to remind its owner that every decision carried the trust of an entire community. Later that evening, Olivia finally visited her father to celebrate his birthday. She handed him the leather journal she had almost failed to deliver the night before. Robert smiled warmly as he opened the gift, but before turning the first page, he looked at his daughter and quietly said, "I am not proud because you are my daughter. I am proud because you chose dignity when it would have been easier to choose anger." Olivia smiled back, knowing those words meant more than any public apology ever could. Outside, the city continued moving forward just as it always had, but somewhere in Richmond, one lesson would be remembered for years to come. Authority may command attention for a moment, but integrity is what earns respect long after the badge is gone. Please like and subscribe to the channel to hear more stories of justice.